everyone, and welcome to the special conversation. Joe Johnson, member of the UK House of Lords and a former minister, is joining me live from London. Lord Johnson, really appreciate your time. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has arrived in India with his wife Akshata Murthy for the G20 Summit. My question is, how is India's G20 presidency being seen by the UK?
Well, it's being followed incredibly closely. India has turned the G20 into a diplomatic spectacle that's never been seen before. And we also now have the additional interest of the UK's first Prime Minister of Indian origin returning to his heritage for this important summit. So it's being followed with great interest in the UK and receiving levels of coverage which the G20 doesn't generally get in popular newspapers, popular media.
You've called it a diplomatic spectacle. There's a lot of anticipation, certainly, as to whether there'll be a joint communique, or do you think that's really not important, given the kind of messaging that India has managed to send, be it on the payment system or crypto or financial inclusion, the larger message of having African Union as a potential member? Do you think those message of inclusivity is bigger than a potential document?
Look, a joint statement would be a triumph for the Indian diplomatic system. It would not be easy to pull off, given the widening differences between the US and its close allies on issues around Ukraine, most importantly. But India will nonetheless have achieved an awful lot in its preparations for the G20 and in what it says about India as a power in the world today. This is really the culmination of perhaps a 15, 20-year coming out party for India as a major economy and as a major force in global governance. So even if there isn't a joint statement at the end of the day, which may not be altogether surprising given the difficulties which we've seen in preparatory meetings on trade, on finance, on climate change, and on Ukraine. Nonetheless, India will have still gained an awful lot in terms of how it's handled the G20 over the last period of time.
And Downing Street has called this visit of the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak as historic, and what clearly is a powerful reminder, according to Downing Street, of the living bridge between the two countries. There's a bilateral with the Indian Prime Minister, which is scheduled, where they're likely to talk perhaps about the UK-India free trade agreement. There is increasing optimism that a deal can be reached soon. We do know that India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had said that she hopes that this deal will be done before the end of the year. As far as UK is concerned, is there some kind of timeline that you're looking at?
Well, look, we've seen deadlines come and go, to be honest, over quite a considerable period of time. Don't forget the backstory to all of this, which was that when the UK was part of the European Union, negotiations were already underway in that setting, which started all the way back in 2007. When the UK left the European Union 3 or 4 years ago, we started a separate track of bilateral negotiations. These will take their time. We hope we will get there in the end. But no one wants to sacrifice the quality of the deal for speed just for the sake of getting one done. That would be a mistake. It's better to have a high-quality deal than to rush to do it by some arbitrary deadline or other. And I think the Prime Minister is quite clear on that in his approach to these meetings.
Lord Johnson, you also co-authored a book, Reconnecting Britain and India. Would you say that with Rishi Sunak, who has spoken about his special ties with India, being at the helm, those ties will be further strengthened?
Yes, I would hope so. I mean, the UK and India have a lot that they can do together, working in all manner of different ways on education, on climate change finance, on deepening our trade and investment ties. So there's a huge amount that we can do together, and having a Prime Minister with a very strong affinity for India, with a deep understanding of many of the issues that India itself is grappling with, can only help.
And does UK see India as a voice of the global South? with that push coming for the inclusion of African Union. Indian Prime Minister has written to all the heads of states, and that is going to be perhaps the biggest takeaway of his G20 presidency of India.
Yeah, look, it's a smart move by Prime Minister Modi to increase the representativeness of the G20 and to make more countries, particularly in Africa, feel that they have a proper voice in global governance. The G20 is an important organization. It brings together nearly 85% of global GDP. It accounts for, 80% of climate change emissions, 80% of global trade. So it's right that it's properly representative. Of course, increasing its membership will bring challenges of coherence. And that's why it's such an important test of India's diplomatic dexterity and skill over coming 48 hours to see whether they can actually manage to get some progress on substantive issues from this increasingly disparate group of countries.
And the fact that the timing of this summit and India's presidency, there are two black swan events that's there in terms of Ukraine-Russia conflict and also the COVID-19 pandemic in a very, very divided world. The negotiations have been going on. Do you think, even if it has to do with food security, issues of climate commitments, that would be certainly a great achievement for India?
Look, I mean, the Ukraine issue does remain a point of contention between India and countries such as the UK and also the US and others across Europe, and indeed Australia and Japan and so on. I mean, there is a strong demand and desire for India to use its clout, its influence to help end the war. It is a war, and India really would rise in the estimation of all of those countries if it used its energies, its diplomatic weight with countries around the world to try and bring this terrible conflict to an end. I think that would be an outstanding contribution that India could make at the moment.
Lord Johnson, in terms of India-UK ties, the relationship between the two countries, how is it in general being viewed under Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership?
Well, I'm just delighted that the living bridge is so strong at the moment. One of the things, I was a former UK education minister, and one of the things I took greatest pride in was the increase in the number of people from the UK going to India for study and research purposes, and similarly in the other direction, the number of Indian students and academics coming to study and research in the UK. That relationship is super strong at the moment. And I think that's really exciting because India is a great knowledge economy and so is the UK. And when we collaborate in those areas of research and international student mobility, we can really do great things together. So I'm very optimistic for this relationship, particularly in that area of the living bridge that is represented by student mobility and academic mobility. I think it's super exciting.
The idea of people-to-people ties in particular, you have worked in India as a journalist, and that was the time when you wrote that book, and I think you missed that question that I had asked, particularly about reconnecting Britain and India. Your own experience.
Yeah, look, I had the privilege to work with Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who's now at NITI Aayog, was then boss of FICCI. He was a great person to collaborate with and to work with, and I learned an awful lot from him. Look, there are so many different ways in which the UK and India can move their relationship forward, whether it's in the creative industries, in the realm of education, whether it's in the realm of infrastructure, project finance. There is an almost unlimited potential for us to do more together. And I'm delighted that the Prime Minister is in country today holding constructive meetings with the Indian government, including with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, to do just that.
Would you say that there is a lot of interest, particularly to do with the digital public infrastructure that India has managed to build in the last few years?
Yeah, the India stack is now a global term. People are in awe of what India is achieving in terms of digitizing the delivery of public services. A few minutes ago, I downloaded your G20 digital app, and it's a remarkable bit of user-friendly tech I even learnt a few yoga moves from it. It's got a section for yoga relaxation on it. So all manner of things. India is leading the way digitally, even in yoga.
And Lord Johnson, your final thoughts before I let you go. I'm sure you and I will have another round of conversation on Sunday after a possible Delhi declaration. Nevertheless, this is an epoch moment for India and the world.
Yeah, it's a very big moment. It's, India's big coming out party after 15, 20 years of stronger than average economic growth. The world is looking to India to take up the baton in many ways. And, the test will be whether India's diplomats can craft a language that reconciles the deepening divides between the West and countries such as Russia and China that are deeply opposed to many of the things which the Western delegates will be trying to move forward, particularly on Ukraine.
All right, Joe Johnson, pleasure speaking to you. And had you been a journalist, continued as a journalist, perhaps you would be in India at the media center, experiencing what you say, those yoga moves and others as well. So pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much, Lord Johnson.
Thank you.